Welcome to storagecraft's presentation on Shadow Protect 4.0. We're very excited about this release of Shadow Protect. We have a lot of exciting things to show you in the next little bit. First thing I want to talk about is the menu on the left-hand side. You're able to use this menu to jump to any one of these sections. If you want to look at our management console, our recovery environment, or how to perform a Head Start restore, you can jump to those sections right now. If you choose to watch this presentation, it will just continue to play all the way through. Shadow Protect 4.0, back up fast and recover faster. So what are we going to talk about during this presentation? We're going to give you a quick overview of the Shadow Protect 4.0 product family. We're going to talk about some of its benefits. We're going to talk about all of its features. And then we're going to give you a product demonstration of all of the features. We're going to show you how to set up a backup job, how to restore files and folders, perform a restore, replicate your data, and maybe start a Head Start restore as well. So everything that I'm going to show you today is available in Shadow Protect Server, Shadow Protect Small Business Server, Image Manager Enterprise, which is a new product introduced with Shadow Protect 4.0, and Shadow Protect Desktop. If you're looking for information on Shadow Protect IT Edition, and Shadow Protect Granular Recovery for Exchange, use the menu and hop over to that particular product page and you'll see a product tour there for those products. So at StorageCraft, it's always been our goal to have the smallest recovery time objective. So a recovery time objective is the point to where you have some kind of disaster, whether it be a deleted file, folder, a system has melted down to the time that you can restore that data and get that machine back up and running. With Shadow Protect, we've always had very small recovery time objectives. We have incredible backup speeds. We have even awesome restore speeds. With the Shadow Protect 4.0, we are able to shrink that recovery time to almost near instant failover. And I'm going to show you how you can do that today. By reducing that RTO, you're maximizing that business continuity. You have the ability to save money and minimize lost business opportunities. Again, a missing file, a missing email, a server gone down is going to cause lost business opportunities. We've also made it simple to manage all of your backup and disaster infrastructure with Shadow Protect 4.0. So let's talk about some of the features here. Reliable backup. Shadow Protect always backs up. It works awesome. You're going to get volume level full backups, incremental backups, and differential backups with Shadow Protect. So let me translate that, what that means. We have a volume snapshot manager, which gives us the ability to take a picture or a photograph of a machine while it's hot and running. We can do that down to every 15 minutes. When we take that snapshot, we will always back up at the sector level, which is the smallest amount of data on that disk. By backing up the sector level, we can track those changes in real time. So when it comes time to take another backup, we're backing up just the changes. That's what gives you the incremental technology. So you literally are getting exact point-in-time backups of the operating system, the applications, the configuration, network settings, the data, everything. We work within Microsoft's VSS framework, which means when we go to take that snapshot, we holler out to the VSS framework and we say, get ready. So applications like Exchange and SQL and everything else is going to get ready for that snapshot, which literally takes milliseconds. And once that snapshot is done, that technology is released to go back to work. So you can ensure that when we are backing up your system, we are getting everything on that disk. Fast recovery. We back up reliable, but now we can recover even faster. One of the coolest features that I think we have is Virtual Boot. Virtual Boot gives you the ability to literally right mouse click on any one of our backup images, whether it be a full or an incremental or whatever it is, and tell it to boot as a virtual machine. And within a minute or two later, you have a virtual machine of that server from that point in time up and running. We also have another feature called a hardware independent restore. So if you have dying hardware and you want to go buy new hardware and you want to keep the same operating system, you don't want to have to install all your apps and all your security settings and everything else like that, the hardware independent restore will allow you to, after you lay the data down, go in and tell that operating system, hey, you're no longer on this old hardware. You're now on this new hardware. It's an awesome feature. It runs really well. We have a really robust driver library. So if you are going to newer hardware, it's a good chance that we're going to see it. If not, you can always go out and grab the drivers and tell us what drivers to use as well. We have the ability to do bare metal recovery as well. If you have a brand new machine with a brand new disk that's never been provisioned before, you can do that. Also, file and folder level recovery. Just as you can right mouse click on an image, whether it be an incremental or full, and tell it to virtual boot, you can also right mouse click on it and tell it to mount as a drive letter and literally just drag and drop the files back where you need it to go. Because of our hardware independent restore, we have the ability to do restores to completely dissimilar hardware to and from virtual environments. Flexible system migration. You can't get any more flexible than right mouse clicking on an image and telling it to boot as a virtual machine. I mean, that's flexible. Virtual Converter. This is a tool built within Shadow Protect 4.0. It allows you, again, to pick any one of those point-in-time images, whether it be a full or an incremental again, and convert that to a virtual disk file. We can convert to a Microsoft Hyper-V VHD file or a VMware VMDK file as well. Then you can go into that infrastructure, create a virtual machine, and point it to that hard drive, that virtual disk file. Simplified management. We now have a management console, an enterprise view into all of the systems that are running Shadow Protect on your network. You can group them by resource or by job or whatever you desire there. You also can go out and see what machines on your network is running Shadow Protect, and then the ones that are not, you can actually do a push install. You can activate the license and tell the machines to reboot as well. We have some new notification and reporting within the product as well. So if backup jobs are failing, you can get notified on that, but also you can get a daily summary and a weekly summary out of Shadow Protect for that backup job as well. We have a complementary tool that comes with Shadow Protect 4.0. That tool is called Image Manager. I don't want to get too confusing yet, but there are two versions of Image Manager. There's Image Manager, and then there is Image Manager Enterprise. But I want to point out there is only one installer. So when you install Image Manager, you also are installing Image Manager Enterprise, but it does take a key to unlock those features. Image Manager is designed to verify and re-verify all of your images that you're taking with Shadow Protect. We also have a feature or a backup job within Shadow Protect 4.0 called Continuous Incrementals. And its goal or its job is to take one full backup only and then incrementals forever after that. And each incremental is dependent on the one before it all the way back to the full. So each time a backup fires off, your chain is growing, and it can grow out of control. So we also have built in consolidation within Image Manager, and it's going to take all of the backups that you're taking every single day and reduce that dependency chain down to one file. Then it will create collapsed weeklies and collapsed monthlies. I don't want to get too technical with this, but just keep in mind Image Manager is going to consolidate that job and keep that chain as small as possible. Now we also have some new notification and reporting within Image Manager 4.0 as well. So when it's verifying and consolidating, if errors pop up and it starts having problems, it will notify you and let you know what's going on there as well. A couple of new features with Image Manager Enterprise. The first one I'm most excited about is Head Start Restore. This is the ability to start restoring to a VMDK or a VHD file while your backups are still happening. So as your backups are going every day, day in, day out, this new data can still be applied to this virtualization hard drive. And you can tell it to say, oh, you know what, keep this image 2 hours old. So as new data is coming in, anything that's older than 2 hours is automatically restored or Head Start Restore into this virtual disk file. And if you do have a failure, you can then simply tell the job to finalize that disk, and then you can use that hard drive, that virtual disk file, into a virtual machine and boot. Replication. Some exciting new features with the replication. The ability to replicate local is built into the regular Image Manager. Network and FTP are built into the Image Manager Enterprise. And this isn't just a simple little FTP transport, whatever's in this folder, just ship it over. Because of the way that the continuous incremental job works, we have built in a replication engine. It knows what files that you need on your remote site for that off-site disaster recovery. So keep in mind, this is not just a simple FTP transport. This is a true replication engine and synchronization that will keep your images in sync at that remote location as well. When you purchase Shadow Protect, we will give you the Rapid Recovery CD. You can either get it ISO or you can get it shipped to you, but it is a Windows bootable CD-ROM that will give you the ability to lay your data down to a different system, even to the same system if you need to. You can use this to restore to virtual machines or other physical machines. It has that hardware-independent restore feature built into it, and it also has the ability to do bare metal recovery as well. So after you boot into this environment, you'll lay your data from the images right back down to that machine, perform an HIR and say you're no longer on the old hardware, you're on the new hardware, and away you go. You can boot that machine. If your images happen to be like on a USB drive or an eSATA, you can still restore from there. Or if they happen to be on a network, you can also restore from that location as well. Let's take a quick look at Shadow Protect 4.0, and we're going to take a look at Image Manager and Image Manager Enterprise as well. So the first thing in Shadow Protect 4.0 that I would like to show you is the management view or the management console. You can see from this one screen that I have some machines already categorized into groups. We have Mats 2008 and Potter in the server group. So we can see that Potter is backing up. It's never had any failed backups, no problems. We know what's going on. We can see with Mats 2008, we can see that it's backed up once and it failed, and it's never going to back up again. So this kind of gives us a quick peek into what's going on with each of these machines without having to go into each machine directly. There's a couple of ways that you can install Shadow Protect. First, you can install Shadow Protect with the graphical user interface or the GUI, and that's what we're looking at now as the console. And you can tell the console to connect to a particular machine. Also, you can install Shadow Protect without the GUI, without the console. And then there's no way, especially if you're going to install this on a desktop, there's no way for that user to get in or mess with the backup settings. But you, sitting from your administrator desk, you can then go into this machine, double-click it, look at the backup job, and create a brand new backup job without having to remote desktop into that machine. Let's take a look at the push install. We'll click Install. Next. Now we can choose the package. This is really important because if you are going to do a push install to the small business server, you're going to want to grab the small business server installer. And make sure when you're deploying to a desktop or a server that you're grabbing the right installer. We'll click Next. This is where we can go discover what machines are out on the network. If I do domain name, I can put in the domain name here. I can tell it to use specific credentials. In this case, I'm just going to use the domain admin. And we're going to tell it to discover services as well. So we can see here that it found a couple of machines, Granger, the agent's installed, Potter, and then Ron. Ron is not installed. So let's go ahead and install onto Ron. We'll click Next. Automatically activate the installed agents. So if you have an environment where you're going to push to 10 different servers all at the same time, and you have a serial number that has, say for instance, 10 activations on it, you can come in here and put your name and put in the serial number, and it will activate those agents after install. Shadow Protect does require a reboot when you install it. You can specify a reboot time if you wanted it to reboot on the weekend, say at 1:30 in the afternoon, rather than in production time in the middle of the week. You can do that as well. If you unselect this, as soon as the backup is done, it will go ahead and reboot this, and you can give, if it's like a desktop, you can give that user a message as well. So you can see the management view is very easy. It makes it easy to get in and manage your installations and set up the backup jobs, and also push install and deploy Shadow Protect. All right, let's take a second to look at the notification and reporting. We'll go up to Options and Agent Options. And now you have the ability to fill out some SMTP server information, the ports, the username, the passwords, the to and the froms. Also, you have the ability to include a subject suffix or a body prefix. So if you want to put in a specific string so you know what server this is coming from, you have the ability to do that as well. You can be emailed on success and failure. You can be sent a daily report and a weekly report. And then you can choose the time of day that you would like the daily and the weekly report to come in on. One thing that I'd like to point out, when you set up your SMTP information, when you click into each different field, notice the hints here, the notes down here are going to tell you what it's looking for. And, it even will give you a hint for, if you're using like Gmail, hey, you want to use port 65, 465 and do plain and so on. So don't forget to use these notes when you're setting it up, and also use the test email button to make sure that that email is getting to you correctly. Let's take a few minutes and talk about backup. We're going to talk about the different types of backup jobs, when to use them, and how to set them up. Everything within Shadow Protect is wizard-based, which makes it really easy to set up a backup job, but there's also a lot of technical power within those wizards as well. Let's launch the backup wizard. We'll click Next. In this case, I want to back up just the C and the E drive, and we're going to leave the F drive. We'll click Next. Now we can choose to browse out. In fact, you know what? I'm going to browse out and back up to this F drive as well. I have the ability to come in and name these files. So I know this is Austin's machine, so I can say, this is Austin J C volume. And then I can put that also on the E volume. So I know what machine and what volume that these images are from. We'll click Next. Here's where you select what type of backup job you want to do. Let's talk about each one individually very quickly. If you decide to select the Now option, you have the ability to come in, take a snapshot, and it will do a full backup of the entire disk, the application settings, security settings, everything on there. You can come back at a later time, whether it be a day or two or 2 weeks or a year, whatever. And if you have the full and you have the drive, you have the ability to scan both and then back up what's different. If you choose to do later, this is a full sometime point in the future. Maybe it's the end of the quarter for you. You can tell it to run a full at midnight at the end of the quarter, so you're capturing all of those machines, and then you can archive that off or do whatever you want to do with it. The weekly schedule is our default schedule. Most of our small business customers and our desktop users live within the weekly schedule. By default, it's going to take a full backup on Sunday at 6 o'clock every single week. You're always going to take at least one full backup a week with the weekly schedule. Then Monday through Friday between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., it's going to take a backup every hour on the hour, and you're going to end up with 11 backups a day. So again, anytime that we start with a full, we're starting a new chain. So we're going to end up with a new backup set or a new backup chain every single week. We also can choose how often we want this to back up. If losing an hour is detrimental to this machine, we can tell this to shrink down and do it as often as every 15 minutes right here. And you can see within the same schedule, now we're going to get 41 backups a day. So when do you use the weekly schedule? Well, if you're not planning on backing up off-site through the internet, so meaning that maybe you're going to back up to a drive and then replicate that data to a drive, a hot swappable drive that's going to walk out the front door with somebody. Also, if you're just planning on backing up to a USB drive and you're not really worried about, complete disaster recovery with an offsite backup, the weekly backup is the easiest schedule to live in because you can set up a retention policy and get old backups out of the way and everything else like that. And that's the same with the monthly schedule as well. You can come in and choose what days of the month you would like a full backup to happen. We even have a last option. So if you want to just take a full backup on the last day of the month at a particular time, and then come in and do at least one incremental a day. This is going to be for your less mission critical machines. Also, you have the ability to set up a retention policy and tell it to get old backups out of the way when new backups are coming in. The continuous incremental, this backup schedule is unique to us. A lot of people, when they look at this, will look at the weekly and say, wow, this looks exactly the same. But if you notice, this says VSS incremental backups, and when we come here, this says full. So don't get confused that we're going to do a full backup at least once a week with the continuous incremental. It's not going to do that. It is going to take one full backup once. Then it's going to do the incremental changes from this point forward. When do you use the continuous incremental? First off, it was designed to back up locally and then allow you to ship this data offsite to your disaster recovery location. The benefit of this is when you only back up one full, you only have to ship that full once. Then you're just replicating just the incrementals, those small, minute changes throughout the day as they're happening. Again, so each time we take a backup, the incremental chain grows because each incremental is dependent on the one before it all the way back to the full. So if you look here, we give you a tip that tells you, hey, you need to install Shadow Protect Image Manager service with this option. So keep in mind, when you're doing continuous incrementals, you also are going to use Image Manager. You have to. It's a requirement. I'm going to show you how to set that up here in just a bit. So what's the difference between these two boxes? VSS incremental backups and additional VSS incremental backups. If you leave this checkbox, use VSS checked, the difference between these two is nothing. They're exactly the same. You have the option to not use the VSS framework. What that means is when we go to take a snapshot, we're not going to tell the framework about it. Meaning applications like Exchange and SQL and anything that's VSS aware will not be told to get in that good state. Typically, you're always going to leave this checked. Then if you leave this unchecked, you can at least tell it to do one VSS incremental a day. But again, if you're leaving this checked, the two options are exactly the same. And I recommend leaving it checked because simply you want your applications like Exchange and SQL and IIS and SharePoint to be put into that good state as well. All right, let's take a look at the next screen. Okay, so you can see here we do have compression within the backup job. Standard is going to get you anywhere from 30 to 50% depending on the type of data that you're backing up. High will get you about 10% more, but it may take you a little longer to back that up. So again, I recommend always leaving it on standard. We have encryption as well. If you check this, you can put in your own password, and I highly, highly recommend that you use a password scheme, something that you can put in a filing cabinet and lock away for this, because if you lose this password, there is no way to unencrypt your image. Let's go look at some of the advanced settings. We have a performance throttling engine built into Shadow Protect, but if you want to tell Shadow Protect how much I/O really to use, you can tell it that, but I always recommend leave this at 100% because if the server's not under a load, we're going to hit it for everything we can to get that backup job done as fast as possible. And with continuous incrementals, 99.9% of the time when you're taking a backup, it's just the changes, so they fire off really fast anyways. You have the ability to generate MD5 files when creating an image. This is a huge advantage, especially when you're shipping your data off-site to an off-site disaster recovery location through the internet. MD5 files allow us to use what's called a checksum and allows us to verify these files very fast and efficiently to know whether these files are good or not. We have the ability to run pre- and post-snapshot scripts. So if you have technology that's not VSS aware, like a really old version of Exchange or SQL, then you can come in and run a batch file or a VB script or something to put that technology into a good state for the snapshot, and then after the snapshot, tell it to go back to work. And then we have post-backup scripts that will run after every single successful backup as well. If you do enable encryption within your backup job, you have the ability to tell it what type of encryption to use. We have RC4 128, AES 128, and AES 256-bit encryption. So if you are a medical firm or you have to be HIPAA compliant or have other regulations on you, you can get that AES 256-bit encryption as well. All right, let's go on. I'm going to uncheck encryption. Now, we're ready to execute this job. I can tell it to execute now or it will run at the next scheduled time. And again, it's always going to start with the full. So in this case, we're in the middle of production day. I don't want a full to start right now. I'm going to go ahead and schedule this to run later. I'm just going to click finish. Let's talk about mounting an image and doing some file and folder level recovery. I have some images from the server potter, and a user is telling me that on the 5th, they had some files on this server, but after the 5th, they were gone. So I'm going to take any one of these point in times from the 5th. Let's go ahead and mount this 5 o'clock incremental. Again, I'm going to right mouse click, and I have two options here. I have mount, which will give me the mount wizard and allow me to choose the drive letter and choose some other settings, or I have quick mount, which is going to give me the next available drive letter, which in this case is going to be E. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to just mount and run the mount wizard, and so I can show you some of the options here. The first thing it's showing me here is just some data, where this image came from, how big it was, and everything else like that, the point in time of when it was. We'll click Next. This is just showing me the dependency chain of the files that need to be there. That's okay. We're going to click Next. Now, again, I can choose the next available drive letter. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to mount as P because it's the Potter server. But I also have the option to mount as a subfolder under an NTFS file system. So if I wanted to, I could actually tell it to mount in the root of C and give it a custom name. So we could say Potter mount. Another cool thing about mounting it as a subfolder under an NTFS file system is if there was security or user rights to this drive or this image that you're mounting, those user rights and security will stay in place. So if this was the user share, you could simply just mount it as an NTFS folder, and then if the person has rights to get into that folder, they'll be able to get in there. Otherwise, they'll just see that it's there. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to mount as P. So another checkbox here. This can be kind of interesting. If I check this, this will allow rights to this point in time. One thing I want to make clear is we never ever edit this point in time, this incremental or this full, whatever you're mounting. We never inject changes into there. All of the changes that you're going to do are going to be saved to a new incremental. Where does this become a benefit? Well, let's say you have an image from a machine that has a virus. You can mount this as read-write on a machine that has the latest, greatest virus protection, scan it, remove the virus, and then when you dismount it, those changes will be saved into an incremental file. And then from there, you can restore that back to the same machine and you have effectively removed the virus. There are a lot of tools and things that you can use on an image when you check allow rights. But just keep in mind, we're going to save all the changes to an incremental so you're still preserving this point in time that you're mounting. In this case, I'm just going to uncheck it because I want to just drag a file and drop it to the desktop. So we'll click Next. And within a few seconds, we will have a P drive. You see it popping up right there. It will always open up another Windows Explorer for us. So this is the file they're looking for, the Shadow Protect 4.0 logo. So I'm just going to go ahead and just drag that right to the desktop. And we click on desktop. Here we go. There's the file. So very simple to mount and drag and drop files and folders, whatever needed. Now that I'm done with this, I can right mouse click on the drive letter and do a dismount. That will run the dismount wizard for you. And if you mounted it read-write, you need to dismount this way because then you can tell it to save the changes out. If you just do it a quick mount, that's going to go ahead and just get rid of the drive letter. It's no longer mounted and you're done. When it becomes time to perform a recovery, you will use our Shadow Protect Recovery CD. You can either download that on the internet as an ISO file and burn it to a CD-ROM, or you can request a CD when you purchase Shadow Protect. If you've had a disaster and you need to perform a recovery, whether it's to the same machine or to dissimilar hardware, into a virtual machine or out of a virtual machine back to a physical machine, you will use the recovery CD that we provide you when you buy Shadow Protect 4.0. The recovery CD has two operating systems that you can boot into to perform a restore. The first operating system is a Windows 7 based operating system. Now this doesn't mean that you're going to be restoring Windows 7, but just using Windows 7 to perform the restore. I recommend 100% of the time starting with this Windows 7 recovery environment. Because if you're migrating an older OS or an older install to brand new hardware, the Windows 7 PE environment, you're going to get better hardware support. Also, if you boot into this environment and we don't happen to see your storage controller, your NIC, or what have you, you can go to the manufacturer's website, grab the INF, and dynamically load the NIC and the storage controllers within the Windows 7 environment. Also, you can dynamically load USB drives and everything else. So it's just much easier to work within the Windows 7 based environment, even if you're restoring Windows 2003 or Windows 2000 Server. If you do decide to use the 2003 legacy environment, keep in mind that if you're going to newer hardware, you might have to hit F6, provide a floppy with the INF or the storage controller to be able to see that array and lay that data down. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose the Windows 7 based environment. While this is booting up, it's going to ask you if you want to start networking. In this case, we do because our images are out on the network. We'll be able to get an IP address from our DHCP server. If not, we'll be able to assign a static IP. Now that we're booted into the recovery environment, you can see that the recovery environment looks just like the installed product. This is a good thing because in the middle of a disaster, you don't need to have to figure out a new interface, a new way of doing things. The first thing I always do when I boot into the recovery environment is go to the Disk Map tab. The Disk Map tab is going to show me what is physically attached to this machine and the volumes that I can perform a restore to. So you see here, I do have a 25 gig drive that I can perform a restore to. And you can see that it's unpartitioned. And this is okay because we can do a bare metal recovery as well. So let's go map our network drive and get at our backup images. We'll launch the network configuration. And in here, I'll be able to click on network drive. Just pick a random drive letter and let's put in the path. We need to put in the user credentials that has rights to this location. And click Map Drive. Okay, we have our map drive. Let's go perform a restore. For this, I'm going to launch the Restore Volume Wizard. The first thing it's going to ask me is what partition or what drive do I want to perform a restore to? Well, as I said before, this drive is unallocated. So I can right mouse click on it and create a primary partition using all of the free space or enter in a size. Now keep in mind, if you enter in a size, there is a limitation here. You need to enter a size that is the same size or bigger than the volume that you're coming from. So for example, if you're coming from a 100 gig volume, but you are only using 20 gigs worth of data, you still have to go to a 100 gig volume or larger. And in this day and age when hard drive space is so inexpensive, that's not a hard thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to use the entire volume here. Once it will assign a drive letter, we'll be able to select it and click Next to perform the restore. Now we have two options here. We can perform a restore or we have the ability to do a manual head start restore. I'm going to cover this in a later video, so right now let's just go ahead and perform a standard restore. We'll browse out to the computer and find our map network drive, which is under the network locations. Here is the machine that has just died. I want to go ahead and just grab this incremental. It's just a point in time. And we'll click open. And it's giving me information of when it was created and all that fun stuff. Click next. And next again. So because I am doing a bare metal recovery, I have a few options I need to take care of here. I do want to set this partition active. It is my bootable partition. And I have the option to restore the master boot record from the image, which you will do 99% of the time, or restore Windows Original MBR. The times that you need to restore Windows Original MBR is if you're coming from a server that had utility partitions in the beginning of the drive and you're not going to be restoring them here. So typically you want to start out with a fresh MBR. In this case, I'm going to start out with the one from the image. Restore disk signatures. This feature allows you to maintain drive letters. You only really need to check this if, say, your D, what should be D, is really named H or I or some other drive letter. Hidden disk tracks, these are the sectors right after the master boot record. I always leave this checked as well. Now, because we are going from physical hardware to a virtual machine here, I am going to dissimilar hardware. So I need to run our hardware independent restore. Let's take a look at the advanced options here. By default, low matches will be used on the drivers if better ones are not found. I always recommend leaving this on low because if we have the exact drivers, we'll use them. If not, we're going to use the next best match to the next best match. In this case, your goal is to boot this machine as fast as possible to restore business continuity and get it up and running. So again, let Shadow Protect do its job, picking the best drivers. Keep in mind, HIR is not a magic button fix-all. It is a please let this boot on completely dissimilar hardware feature, okay? Meaning that you may have to still load additional drivers or more current drivers than what we have on our recovery CD. If you would like to do that as part of the HIR, you can come up here and add a file or add a directory and give it the exact drivers to the version of the OS that you're running. So you can take care of all that housekeeping items right here within the HIR wizard. Let's go ahead and click OK and click Next. And we're going to click Finish and let this run. Let's take a look at the virtual converter tool. You'll be able to find that under the backup image tool. Again, it's wizard based, and you just need to point it to the folder that contains your images that you want to convert into a virtual disk file. You'll select the base image that you would like to start with. Click Next. Now you can select the particular point in time that you would like to convert to a virtual disk. Let's go ahead and pick April 8th at 4 o'clock. And we're going to click Next. We have a few options here. We can select the folder where we would like this VMDK or the VHD to be saved as. We can specify the file name. Again, what we're doing is we're picking that particular point in time, and we're going to roll that up into one single solitary file. We can choose to do a Shadow Protect full image, and then maybe we can archive that out or whatever you want to do with it. But we also, again, have the ability to go to a Microsoft Hyper-V VHD file or a VMware VMDK file. All right, let's talk about a very exciting feature with Shadow Protect 4.0, and that feature is called Virtual Boot. Just like you saw a few minutes ago with the ability to mount an image, whether it be a full or an incremental, and mount it as a drive letter and drag and drop files right out of that, you also have the ability to just right mouse click an image and tell it to Virtual Boot. So, Virtual Boot Wizard, again, everything within Shadow Protect is wizard based. One thing I want to make sure is that you know that you need to at least have a gig of RAM available to do this process. Virtual Boot is nothing more than a set of utilities that allows our point-in-time images to be seen by Sun's VirtualBox. If you're unfamiliar with VirtualBox, you can head out to virtualbox.org, download it. There's technical documents and everything right out on that website. VirtualBox is a open source virtualization solution. And that's why we chose it to work with Virtual Boot, simply because it's readily accessible to anybody at any time when you have an emergency. All right, we'll click Next. So this is the Potter server, and on this server, I am only backing up the C drive. If I were backing up D and E and F, whatever drives it had, and they were in this folder, they would automatically be added here, so just keep that in mind. I also have the ability to add images from another machine. Maybe the file store is down, I could add some images from that server here as well. A couple of technical points to make here is your bootable partitions can be up to 2 terabytes in volume size. That doesn't mean that you really have to have 2 terabytes worth of data, but if you have a bootable partition that is up to 2 terabytes, we can boot that. Also, we will support data partitions that are greater than 2 terabytes as well. So I need to tell Virtual Boot which operating system is in this image. It's Windows 2003. Tell it to create the virtual machine in VirtualBox. Automatically start it after creating it. What name would I like to give this virtual machine within VirtualBox's interface? And how much RAM do I want to give this as well? I'm going to go ahead and tell it to take a whole gig. We'll click Next and Finish. So the first thing that Virtual Boot is going to go out and do is it's going to create, just like when we mounted that image, read-write, it's going to create a brand new file and start saving changes to it. So again, we are preserving that point in time. So now it's performing a hardware independent restore into this bootable image. It's going to say you're no longer on that physical machine that you were coming from. Now you're going to be booted up into this virtual machine. And here are the drivers and chipset drivers and everything that you need to know to talk to this virtual machine. So we'll go ahead and let this run here. Okay, so it has finished. It's now creating the virtual machine and it will boot it up. So this is VirtualBox information telling me that the right control is the host key, the uncapture and capture key. So we're going to tell it OK, and here we go. It is now booting this 2003 within just a minute or two into a VirtualBox virtual machine. While this is booting, let's talk about one more thing. You're going to get your typical Windows plug and play. It's going to want to load device drivers and everything else like that. So keep in mind that this just isn't a one magic button fix all. You may have to tweak some things, but if you can get the machine to boot into the virtual machine, you own it. You can now get it up and running, get it connected to the network, whatever you need to do to get out of that disaster. Okay, this is Image Manager. Like we said before, Image Manager was designed to come in and verify your image files, re-verify them, and consolidate them to make sure that the dependency chain is as small as possible. We're going to cover all of the settings, and again, I want to point out one more time that when you install Image Manager with Shadow Protect, you are also installing Image Manager Enterprise, but it will require an activation to unlock the Enterprise features. I'm going to spend the next little bit and show you all of the Image Manager features, and then we're going to break into Image Manager Enterprise. For those of you who have used Image Manager in the past in version 3, we've made some considerable changes. The first thing you'll notice is we have a complete new interface for Image Manager 4.0. We also have notification and some reporting built into Image Manager as well. You can be emailed on failures. What is a failure? Anytime that Image Manager detects a problem with a verified image or a problem within your dependency chain, you will get an email. And activity, if you're expecting images from a particular machine every single day and they're no longer coming in, you might want to set this setting to 2. If no images come in for 2 days on that particular folder, you will get notified. Another cool setting is low free space. Now you can monitor with Image Manager how much drive space you have and set a threshold for an alert on an email. And then you can receive a daily summary, and that'll let you know what's going on in the life of Image Manager on this machine as well. You can come in and add your SMTP server or your outgoing mail server to be able to send you those emails. So when you start using Image Manager, you want to tell it you want to start managing a particular folder. In this case, I am managing 2 folders, 2 servers. Shadow Protect is backing up to these locations, and so I want to verify and re-verify these images as they come in. So I've already set some of these settings up. Let's go ahead and take a look at them. On the Verify, we'll click the sprocket here, and I have the option to immediately verify new images when they're created. What this means is when we start managing a folder, we start watching it and watching for new files. When a new file pops in, Image Manager is going to come in and verify that image to make sure everything is okay with it. And then you can tell it to periodically re-verify the existing chain, every single image within this folder. So you can set it for 4 days, and every 4 days it will come in and re-verify. And if anything is broken, you will receive an email if you set up the notification settings as well. The consolidation. You only need to use the consolidation when you're using the continuous incremental job out of Shadow Protect. We'll click on the sprocket. For those of you who know how to set up Image Manager, this will look familiar. There is a new option, however, and I'll get to this in just a second. I want to take just a minute and explain a little bit about what's going on with your continuous incremental and the consolidation of that chain. Every single day when you're coming in and you're taking backups, let's say you're taking every hour on the hour and you're getting 10 backups a day. These are called intradailies here in this step. So what happens is each time that you take a backup, as we said before, your chain's going to grow. You take 10 backups a day for 100 days, you now have 1,000 files in your dependency chain. That's way too many. So Image Manager will come in every single day and create what we call a consolidated daily or a collapse daily. So it will take data from the incrementals that are happening every hour on the hour, and it will copy enough data down to a collapse daily file to reduce the dependency chain to 1. Those incremental files that you took every hour on the hour are still there. They're still valid. You can still mount them, drag files and folders out. You can still right mouse click it and virtual boot it. You can still pick it for a restore. The difference is they're no longer dependent because the dependency chain has been shifted to the collapse daily. So if you wanted to, you can set up a retention policy on this and say, okay, 7 days after the collapse, we're going to go ahead and get rid of these files and get them off the system. So what this means is you need to ask yourself, how far back do you want to get to every hour on the hour before the end of the day is okay? If that answer is, wow, a week from now, I really don't care if I can get to the every hour on the hour, I only care if I can get to the end of the day, then we can set this for 7 days. So 7 days after they have been collapsed, they will be deleted. Now, the consolidated dailies or the collapse dailies, 7 days after they have been collapsed into a collapse daily, so every day we're getting a collapse daily, Image Manager is going to take and reduce the dependency chain one more time, which means it's going to take and copy enough data out of these 7 dailies to create a collapsed weekly. So again, we've gone from 10 files a day down to 1, from 7 files a week down to 1 file a week. That is now in my dependency chain. Again, these collapsed dailies, just like the incrementals, they can be mounted, they can be virtual booted, you can choose them to do a restore. Again, they're just no longer needed because we're reducing that dependency chain to be as small as possible. So now you ask yourself a question: how long is it before the end of the day is okay, before the end of the week is okay? And if 2 weeks out, 14 days is okay, then you can say, all right, 14 days after it's been collapsed, these will be deleted. We do this one more time. After 4 collapsed weeklies, we will create a collapsed monthly file, reducing the dependency chain for the last time. And then you can ask yourself that same question: how many days is the end of the week okay versus end of the month? Now, this new feature down here. In the past, when we were working with Image Manager, the collapsed dailies and collapsed weeklies never would delete off the system, just for safe's sake. In case you had problems with your dependency chain in the main folder, you could suck these files out of a subfolder and put them back and restore your dependency chain. But now that we have notification, we have verification, and we have replication, we can feel confident that instead of moving these to a subfolder, which was the default before, you can now delete these collapsed dailies and get them off the system as well. If this isn't clear right now, check back for another video on how to set up continuous incrementals and the collapse dailies, and it'll be very technical and very detailed. Some other options that we have here is you can now tell Image Manager when you would like that consolidated weekly image to happen. If you're backing up incrementals Monday through Friday and you want your collapsed weekly to happen on Saturday, then you can truly have a end of the week collapsed weekly. Same with the monthly. On the monthly file, you can choose what specific day you would like that collapsed monthly to happen. In this case, the end of the month, I think, is a good option. Please note that if you leave it 31, that's always going to be the last day of the month. Even if it's February or a leap year or a month with 30, if you leave it 31, it will always trigger on the last day of the month. Another quick little feature here is the backup images status and details. This is just a quick peek into what's going on with your backup job that's in this folder. Let's take a look at Potter here. And we can see a list of all of the incrementals that happened on that particular day. If I want to look at the day before, I can do that. I can just select each individual image and see how big it is, the method that was used to create it. This is just a sneak peek to what's going on into your backup job. If you start to see the file size of your incrementals grow, now you can get into a simple interface and find out what time of day that's happening. And then maybe you can check the event logs and such of that machine to see what's going on. Okay, let's take a look at the replication. For a true disaster recovery solution, we believe that you need to have a local backup. Again, because 99% of those failures, you're going to require a local backup for that fast recovery. But for that slim chance that you lose your local site, including your backups, you want to be able to pull that data from somewhere else and get your business back up and running. So the replication feature in Image Manager Enterprise will help you accomplish that task. Let's take a look at the settings. One thing I want to point out really quick that Image Manager is that the replication part of Image Manager is part of Image Manager Enterprise and does require an additional license for that. There is one catch, however, that the local drive option is included with regular Image Manager. Network drive and remote site do require that additional licensing. So when do you use the local drive? The example I usually give is when you are backing up with Shadow Protect, say you're doing the weekly or the monthly backup job, and you now want to replicate those backups to a removable drive that you want to walk out the front door. The local drive option will allow you to do that. Again, you allow Shadow Protect to back up to, say, D Backup Granger. Now you can replicate to that removable media. Let's take a look at the remote site. One thing I want to point out here really quick is that the transfer method to get the data from your site to the remote site is FTP. But there is a replication engine built into this process. So you're not just getting an FTP, hey, take the files from here and shove them over there. You're actually getting that replication engine that's going to determine which files actually need to go across to the remote site. And this can get quite complex, especially with the continuous incrementals. So in setting this up, you're going to come in and put the path to the FTP server and the authentication. This option here, don't replicate base images. We recommend that you put your base image on some kind of removable media and get it over to your remote site and copy it down locally. Simply because you could have a base image that say is 20, 30 gigs, 40 gigs, 50 gigs, maybe 200 gigs. That could take a long time to replicate over to your disaster recovery site. And in the meantime, no other backup images are getting there. So you really don't have a true disaster recovery plan until you get your base image there and then start synchronizing the incrementals. But if you don't have a method of getting your base image over there via like a USB drive, then you can leave this checked and it will take time to get across to your remote site. Let's take a look at the replication mode because this is really important. You're going to ask yourself this question: are you replicating to a folder being consolidated by Image Manager? Well, we are backing up to this D Backup Granger folder. It is a continuous incremental, so I am using Image Manager to consolidate to create those collapsed dailies, weeklies, and monthlies. In this case, then, I need to answer yes to this question. And I want to choose the option to replicate only the non-collapsed images. This is really important because as Image Manager starts to create those collapsed dailies, weeklies, and monthly files, those files can get quite huge, especially the collapsed monthly file. So we recommend that you replicate only your non-collapsed images to the remote site. Translation: replicate the incrementals that happen every hour on the hour to the remote site. And then install Image Manager at the remote site and allow those incrementals to be collapsed into collapsed dailies, weeklies, and monthlies there. And that's going to save a lot of time and bandwidth for your disaster recovery solution. Now, if you don't have the option of running Image Manager at the remote site, maybe you're backing up to a hosted site and they don't allow you to run programs on their server, so then you can choose replicate only the collapsed dailies. And this way your chain doesn't get out of control. You'll get your base up there, and then your chain's only going to grow a file a day. So you're only going to have about 365, 66 files a year up there, and that is more manageable for offsite disaster recovery if you cannot run Image Manager at the remote site. Now, if you want to replicate, say, a weekly or a monthly schedule, again, you're not going to be consolidating those schedules with Image Manager. They have their own retention policy built into the backup jobs. Then you would want to choose this option. You can choose to replicate the non-collapsed image files, meaning the incrementals that happen every hour on the hour. And then you can tell it to also sync the deletion of files at the remote site because, again, the weekly and monthly schedules have a retention policy built in, so as the older backup sets are getting deleted to save room for the newer backup sets, that will be matched at your remote site as well. And that's basically how you set up a replication target. Let's take a look at Head Start Restore. So Head Start Restore allows you to set up a restore of your backup images while the backups are continuing to happen. This is really, really cool. You don't want to plan for a disaster, but you definitely want to be prepared when one happens. And when a disaster strikes, you don't want to be waiting around as 200 to 300 gigs of data is restoring back to your server. This will allow you to get that big chunk of the wait time out of the way while everything is happy, and then you can apply the last few incrementals and finalize the disk and boot that virtual machine. Let's take a look at how to set this up. I have the option to go to a VMware VMDK file or a Microsoft Hyper-V VHD file. I happen to be running an ESX server, so I'm going to choose VMware VMDK. I can name this, we're going to call this Granger's Head Start Restore. We'll go pick the folder. If this folder happens to be a shared folder or out on a NAS, you can input the authentication for that here as well. Now we need to pick the base image for the Head Start Restore. So I'll click Add a new Head Start Restore volume. And this base image, along with all of its incrementals in that chain, is what's going to be applied to this Head Start Restore job. And I can double click here and name this something more legible like Granger C drive as well. Okay? Let's take a look at the options of the Head Start Restore. This feature here is what I think makes Head Start Restore so awesome, is you have the ability to tell the Head Start Restore job to delay applying incrementals. This is important to avoid file system corruption, virus and malware attacks, and just plain old OS corruption. And you're going to know pretty quick when you have something going on. So you can tell the Head Start Restore job, look, I would like you to keep all of the incrementals that are less than 4 hours old out of there. Don't apply them. As these incrementals age, and I know my system is still okay, it will allow it to apply those incrementals as they get more than 4 hours old. If you want to be a little bit more conservative and go by days, you have the option to choose that as well. So again, make sure you set up your lag time or your delay on when these incrementals will be applied to your Head Start Restore job. Let's go ahead and click Save, and it's going to go ahead and start initializing. It's going to create the VMDK, and then it's going to start applying the full and all of the incrementals right now. And as it's going to get the biggest part of the wait time out of the way, this is really cool. Let's take a look at finalizing a Head Start Restore job. So I have a Head Start Restore job running on Potter, and let's say we've had a failure and I want to finalize this disk so we can use it as part of a virtual machine. I will click Finalize the Head Start Restore volume. Now I can come in and choose which incremental to apply to this VMDK. So I can choose, if I know that 11:30 on this particular day, everything was okay, I can pick this and choose Finalize, and it will just warn me that it's going to finalize the disk. We'll say okay. Now it's going to go out and start applying the last few incrementals and finalize the disk so it is now usable.